fun masking technique. And I think I showed a little bit of this on the last video, but we'll find a little blank canvas here. First of all, I'm going to take malted milk and show you a fun thing with malted milk. If you haven't seen this before, but malted milk, when I'm always asked what my favorite ink is, I always say malted milk. And it's not a stamping ink per se, in that it's really not the kind of color that you're going to pick to pick up your stamp and stamp with. It's very subtle, but it's the perfect vintage. And I'll show you here. So you have 2 white pages, and I'm taking the malted milk, and I'm just going to blend it onto the page here. You can see it's kind of instantly changing the white surface into a vintage surface. Kind of like a book that's been just starting to change, that you found in the bookshop in the dust, just like I like to find them. And I found with malted milk too, as it dries, some of the harshness, division of the lines, which I like, you know, in some cases, and you can keep adding to do that, but as it dries, it just tends to dry in a more unified pattern even. So now I could keep going, but you get the idea. It instantly changes from white to vintage. It's my favorite ink. Now I'm going to dry that just a second. It's pretty much dry. But because I'm going to be using Scotch tape on the technique here in a second, if it's wet at all, it'll just totally pull the paper up. And what I love about working in a book too is you can see when you get it wet and dry it, you end up with some wrinklage, as I call it. But working in a book, if you keep it closed when you're done and maybe even put something heavy on it, kind of helps. How are you, Bonnie?
Good, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm Fran from Simon Says Stamp.
Oh, hi, Fran. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Okay, so I think I've got that dry enough. We may have a little, you'll at least get the idea of the technique. So this is a very detailed rub-on, so you always want to pull the backing off very slowly. You want to rip it quickly. You lose some of your pieces and parts here. So take that. The rub-ons come off really easy. We don't put popsicle sticks in there because you don't need a popsicle stick. You can use anything. I'm usually using the back of my scissors like I am now. And with a rub-on this big, I usually work in sections because it is so detailed. You don't want to lose anything. So I kind of start to pull slowly, and if I see something not quite coming off, then I keep going. It kind of curls as it goes, so that helps a bit. Almost done. Sometimes I even start back from the other end. Kind of meet it in the middle. Okay. So we got our rub-on there. Now I'm gonna do another color with the blending tool over it. So we got the silver and the malted milk. Let's use the stick candy. blend the stick candy. Definitely still a little wet over there, so. Scotch tape may not work, but you'll get the idea. You definitely want a completely dry surface to do it. So I'm going to put the top back on it. And I'm going to rub the ink off of the rub-on, because we talked about that kind of acting as a resist. And then I'm going to attempt to take it off. Now Scotch tape, especially if you're working on completely dry surface, like we talked about, the backy was a little bit wet, so it may pull the paper up, but you'll get the idea. Completely dry surface, rub-on goes on top, you do any kind of ink color over it, and then you take your Scotch tape. I think it's too wet, but we'll see. You're getting a little bit of it off. Scotch tape basically pulls rub-ons off. It's not wanting to work. Let's do this. I have another idea. Instead of doing it on color first, we'll just put a rub-on down. This is one of my favorite ones to do it with too, because you can basically mask the lines and the numbers. It's the beauty of an art journal. You can just keep experimenting. It's also one of the harder rub-ons to get on because you have to do each little line. But we're getting it. I think we got it. Okay, there we go. Let's do cough syrup. Well, we'll go back to stick candy since I've got that pad on there. I also find it works better on cardstock, the whole technique, than it does on thinner paper. But let's see. There we go. It's really cool. See how it's bringing it up? And you can keep, sometimes I like to just keep it with part of it up, but you could keep pulling until you got the whole rub-on off. Just a really fun masking technique. My paper's a little wet, but I like that. It's grungy, right? Pulling the paper up too. Let's pull up some of the lines. So you get the idea. Thinner paper is going to pull the paper up a little bit, but you can see the fun effect of the Scotch tape pulling up the numbers and the lines and anything that you would put down. Especially this one, if it wasn't so wet, would have really been beautiful. So I think that's about it.